Did you know the United States was once much smaller? Or that a few states used to be part of Mexico? Today we cover the fascinating tale of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Let's travel back to the late 1800s to revisit the whole story behind this territorial debacle that shaped the world map. Hi Spanish learners, and welcome to another episode of Spanish Academy TV. If you're new to our channel, get ready to take your Spanish abilities to a whole new level. In this video, we're learning all the history, background, and important characters behind the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The treaty was first signed in 1848 to mark the official ending of the war between Mexico and the United States of America. This turn of events was key for defining national borders as we know them today. Let's begin this history lesson full of unknown facts and curiosities. But if you haven't done it yet, I just want to remind you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. We post new videos twice a week, and by following these quick, simple steps, you'll make sure that you never miss the exciting content we prepare for you. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo marked the end of a war, but it didn't end there. Mexico yielded 55% of its territory, leading to a change in the world map and limits between both countries. Let's talk about the roots of the conflict between Mexico and the United States that led to the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. There were two main causes behind the conflict. First was the immigration policy that Mexico established in Texas at the time, and the eagerness of the United States to expand. Second, Mexico was going through a severe political and financial crisis after becoming independent. Mexico signed the independence from Spain in 1821. This wasn't easy and happened after 11 years of war. This decade-long conflict took its toll on the country's finances. It put industries at risk and turned Mexico into a less productive country. Agriculture stopped thriving. Mexican elites struggled for power with other sectors of society. It was a very difficult time. Meanwhile, the United States was doing just fine. The economy was flourishing, and it was en route to become a highly powerful country. New Mexico, California, and Texas were part of Mexico and didn't have a large population. The first governments of free Mexico saw an opportunity and began selling portions of land at a very low cost. They also offered any foreigner, the majority being Americans, an opportunity to buy tax-free land in exchange for living in Mexico. This required them to adopt Mexican nationality, religion, and the Spanish language. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? Well, this led to a massive influx of immigrants from the US. And in 1829, the American population in Texas actually outnumbered the Mexican. With so many Americans becoming Mexicans, the United States' intentions of controlling these territories started to manifest. First, they turned their eyes to Texas. The US began creating economic relationships with their population established in these Mexican lands. These Americans also started to express a continuous desire to become independent from Mexico. This power struggle led to a decline in the relationship between both countries. As a desperate measure, the Mexican government turned to Europeans. It gave them the opportunity to also purchase land and allow forced labor for Mexican inmates. Texas was not too happy about the promotion of slavery and rejected the efforts made by the Mexican government. At the time, Mexico was controlled by the military dictatorship of Antonio López de Santa Anna. His ruthless way of governing only made the situation worse. It led to a battle in 1836 between Texans fighting for independence and the president's forces. You know the historic event of the epic fight for the Alamo. Texas won the battle and incarcerated the dictator. His time in prison was not pleasant at all. He was forced to sign the independence of Texas from Mexico. The Texans couldn't have been happier and declared their state independent from the Mexican nation. The Mexican government, on the other hand, refused to accept an agreement signed by a prisoner of war. There wasn't much they could do at the moment, so they saw Texas as a rebellious province they would reclaim later in the future. In 1845, things once again escalated. The United States Congress voted to annex Texas and sent troops to the Rio Grande. The army was led by General Zachary Taylor and was hoping to protect the United States border. The Rio Grande at the time was still considered Mexican territory, and the battle began. The US Congress formally declared war against Mexico. And guess what? Mexico responded by doing the exact same thing. Learning all these interesting facts about Mexican history must be intriguing and captivating. How about signing up for a free trial class with our certified Spanish-speaking teachers? They'll be able to share way more historic curiosities about Spanish-speaking countries, while you also improve your skills. Just go to www.spanish.academy/free-class or click here. Now let's continue with the thrilling story behind the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. After the declaration of war between the US and Mexico, hostilities continued to grow for 2 years. American forces made their way to Monterrey, New Mexico, Chihuahua, and California. They even made it as far as Mexico City through Puebla and Veracruz. The American troops took control of Mexico's capital in 1847. The Mexicans became desperate and were cornered to find a solution to the ongoing conflict. Discussions began for a peace treaty. It was after long and complicated talks that the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was finally established. It was signed on February 2nd, 1848. The first people to sign were Nicholas Trist, a representative of the United States President John Polk, and 3 Mexican representatives, Luis Cuevas, Miguel Atristain, and Bernardo Cuoto. Both countries approved at the time, so it became official by the end of May 1848. So far, so good, right? But this treaty has more to it. It still continues to shape relationships between both countries today. The major consequence of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was the large portion of Mexican territory that then became part of the United States. The border was completely redefined because Mexico gave up to 2.37 million square kilometers of land. This made close to 100,000 Mexican foreigners in what was once their home. The northern portion of the Mexican territory, known as Alta California at the time, became part of the United States. These former Mexican lands are now part of the states of California, Nevada, Utah, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Wyoming, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Colorado. Mexico lost a large portion of productive, resourceful land and became much smaller, while the United States only had to pay Mexico $15 million in compensation for war-related damages to property. The United States guaranteed in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo that they would honor the rights of any Mexican that remained in their borders and offered them the opportunity to keep their nationality or access American citizenship. The almost doubled size of the United States sparked a debate over what to do with their newly acquired land. Disputes began whether to make the new territories free or slave states. This contributed to tensions between the northern and southern United States. And guess what? It led to another complicated conflict you might know as the US Civil War. Here's another question. Were the Mexicans happy? Of course not. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo underwent modifications for a long period of time, and commitments made by the US government unfortunately weren't honored as promised. The United States committed to controlling former Mexican indigenous tribes within their new territory. They promised not to exchange, buy, or trade prisoners, cattle, or stolen items in Mexico. They also promised to rescue and repatriate any indigenous people of Mexican citizenship. Sadly, many of these people still fell into slavery. Mexico's economic crisis continued, and border clashes continued to increase. To be fair, they lost access to lands full of minerals, natural gas, oil, and coal. The Mexicans inside the US became a minority. If we pay attention to the current climate, this still continues to feed immigration policies, and it's been over 200 years since this conflict ended. The background, development, and consequences the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo brought for both countries are of major importance to modern history. It's vital for people of both nations to understand the roots we share. There's Mexican and Hispanic heritage that's a huge part of the US history. Finally, embracing this will ultimately lead to a world that's more tolerant, inclusive, peaceful, and equal. Stories like the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo are usually complex, but highly entertaining and full of fun facts and wacky curiosities. If you want to dive into more stories in Spanish, you can download our free ebook, Weird and Wacky Spanish Stories for Beginners. All 6 weird, wacky, and super entertaining Spanish stories improve your fluency through reading while keeping you amused. If you're still intrigued about learning more about Mexico's interesting history and territory, join me in the next video where I answer the question, is Mexico part of North or Central America? Enjoy the show and see you next time. Adios! I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and click that notification bell to never miss the best Spanish content on the web.